Hey guys, Slick Nick here with my first of hopefully many videos on Kerbal Space Program. For those of you that don't know, this is I won't call it a game, but it is a game that is more or less a simulation of what it's like to develop and create your own rocket company. You know, we see that a lot today with companies like SpaceX, ULA, Rocket Labs, just to name a few. A lot of private companies figuring out how to get these things cheaper, more efficient, reusable, all of those things. So obviously finance is a big challenge with companies like NASA and you know, these private companies have been able to come in and sort of buy up some of that, take some of that work from NASA, and you're seeing tremendous work being done. I think SpaceX is launching satellites every 2 weeks now, so highly efficient, very cheap. And hopefully soon one day we'll be able to ride as passengers and absorb some views from above our planet. How about that? So just looking at the game here, this is kind of our facility. There's various buildings around here, but the most important is this vehicle assembly building. I'm going to see what we're going to fly today. This is a rocket that I've been working on for quite a bit, actually. So just loading into the vehicle assembly building now. And here we are. So this is what I call the Luna 7 lander, which is a variant of my Lucky 7. My Lucky 7 is that bottom stage that you see here, the 6 boosters and core stage. All of that included is sort of responsible for getting us off the pad, through the thick stuff, up to a exit velocity, while shedding weight. We're going to empty these tanks into one another and drop off the empty tanks to reduce weight and drag, and increase efficiency as we're getting through the tough stuff and where the real work of the rocket's being done. So that's sort of our kick stage, if you will, is those 6 boosters followed by that 7th engine lighting in the middle stage. So that's where I come up with the name Lucky 7. Got 7 engines doing the work, and I've had great success with this rocket, sometimes maybe even lucky. Lucky 7. Which unfortunately this part of the rocket will not be returning with us. This is going to be left behind, and we're going to be moving ahead with this upper stage here, which is including our lander on the moon, as well as enough fuel to leave the moon with, we don't need boosters and such to get off the moon when there's hardly any gravity there. So that last stage there is much smaller, needs less, liquid oxygen and propellant to actually get us back. So just to kind of explain what is happening here, what we have is what is known as an asparagus stage rocket, and what that really means is these boosters are going to continue to empty themselves into the next booster. And these boosters are set up in pairs, so we have 3 pairs of 2 boosters, 6 total. And as we're flying, you'll see we're going to lose this booster and this booster, these 2 and this pair. We're going to drop this pair off when it's empty, and the fuel from that booster would have drained into the adjacent one next to it. This one here, keeping it full constantly. So we're dropping that weight off, increasing our efficiency, while still, we're not losing any fuel. We're keeping these things pretty full. Let me just go into that a little bit more and show you. So let's talk about the asparagus staging. So what that means is this tank here and the one adjacent from it, they're in pairs again, is going to unload its fuel into the tank next to it, as well as this tank to that tank. So going down the line, they're going to continue to empty themselves out, while topping off the next tank in the stage order. So that's keeping us full of fuel constantly and allowing us to shed the weight of the empty core by dropping it off the rocket while proceeding forward. So you'll see how that kind of unfolds in real time when we are in our launch, but eventually all of those boosters will be falling off first, and we'll be left with the center core followed by our upper stage. We're bringing some things with us here in the upper stage, like batteries, an antenna. We have some science on board today. We're going to do some science on the moon. So this upper half is really our lander as well as our return vessel. And hopefully we'll be returning with science, assuming we don't crash and blow up. I have some parachutes here for re-entry. There's a heat shield on there to stop us from burning up. And in here's where our astronaut will be chilling. I think I'm going to end up flying Jongus today. We'll see. It's not really all that risky of a flight, so maybe we'll go with someone better. We'll see. But yeah, that's the Lucky 7. Down here we have our, some stability. These will be virtually useless once we're in the vacuum, but while we're in that launch stage, very efficient for control and stability, using those surfaces to sort of guide us or redirect us. Yeah, so that's the Luna 7 lander variant that I have. So we're going to be launching this, landing it, doing science, and hopefully, if we're lucky or good, we'll get it back home with the science and our astronaut. So yeah, this is something that I've worked on for, like I said, the better part of 2 years to perfect and just make it better, more efficient. So I think it's come along pretty good. I use this, like I said, for quite a bit of things. Just checking the staging here, making sure that everything is going to drop off in order as we stage. So yeah, it's a rocket that I've taken a lot of time in revisions, but I think I've perfected it. In here we have our science aboard. These payloads up top here I can change out for quite a few different things. But this particular mission, we're just going to land, do some science, come back. And the science is going to upgrade, our parts and allow us to do better research, build bigger rockets. You're going to unlock more and more technology and stuff in this game as you play, which is the fun part. I built this rocket and I've made it great, and in doing so, I've unlocked a ton of stuff to build my next one and make it bigger and better. Which I'm hoping to do in the next few videos. With that said, I think we're just about ready to launch. Just looking over a last few checks here, just to make sure I'm not missing anything. Staging looks good. All is well. So, next thing to do is launch. I will see you guys over at the launch pad. Alright, so here we are. Let's just turn the thrust up in 3, 2, 1. And we're airborne. So the first thing I typically do is wait for this vessel to get to about 100 meters per second, and I'll start the rollover phase, followed by clicking on the prograde marker to enable the SAS aboard to lock us on that trajectory. So as we're accelerating here, you'll see we're just about through the first stage, is out of fuel, and you'll see us drop that off now. And like I was explaining before with the asparagus staging, you can see the other tanks are completely full right when that drops off, and that's because of what we've done with the staging there. Highly efficient. That's done in the real world. A company like China launches a five engine system with 4 boosters that each have 2 engines that do the same. So we're progressing along here, climbing in altitude and speed. You can see our swivel engine in the middle, and the main core is what's really actually steering us. The boosters do not steer, they do not swivel, they simply light, burn, and go. We're getting ready to drop off our second pair of boosters in the next few seconds here. They're almost out of fuel, and away they go, and you'll see we're full again. So they've done their job, they've emptied out, keeping the next pair of boosters full of fuel. So I'm just checking here our current altitude. I'm waiting till we get out of the atmosphere to sort of cut this engine off, which is around 70,000 kilometers. So once I usually like to pass that a little bit, just in case we fall back down a little bit. We have more maneuverability. If we climb over 70,000 and shut the engine off, that will take us to our next burn. So approaching that. And welcome to space. So our trajectory is now set to about 80,000 kilometers. I'm just going to warp, do a little time travel here so we don't have to sit through the climb. But our vehicle, you can see on that arc, is going to continue to climb past 80,000, and that is the point that we are going to circularize our orbit, which you'll see in a few seconds here. What I am going to do right now is roll the rocket over so when we drop this next stage, they fall away and not onto our rocket. So those will fall, flat and not onto our rocket when we stage those. I'm also going to deploy some of the things we have aboard here, like our solar panels. Just making sure we're going to use some of that sun's power to keep our power up into those batteries. So it takes a second here. There is a faster way to do this. I didn't set it up for this mission. There's simply a hotkey that will deploy all of those at once instead of me rotating around and clicking them all. But so it is. We're doing a manual today. No big deal. And one more. Alright, so our solar array is deployed, we're collecting some power, and we are almost at our periapsis, which is the highest point at which our trajectory is. And that's where we're going to want to get to circularize. I'm going to use what they call a maneuver node. That kind of gives me a reference of when to start the burn to circularize. We're going to burn in the prograde direction, increasing our orbit parallel to the Earth. So what that's going to do is that's going to circularize our trajectory. I just dropped off that last stage, and we now have a single core rocket. No more kick boosters. Those are all done. No more of those. No longer required. So approaching our periapsis, you'll see I start to burn prograde, pushing that orbit circular, and poop, here comes our other axis, and I'm going to wait for this to circularize until I cut off. And we are in orbit of Earth. So if I were to do nothing right now, we would continue going around in circles. At the velocity we're traveling at, and the speed we're traveling at, it's keeping us up. And in this circular orbit, we're not being pulled down by gravity, so we'll continue to just do this circle. But what I am going to do is add a maneuver node, because we are not orbiting Earth today, or Kerbin in this game. We are actually headed to the moon. So I'm setting up that node that's going to tell me when to initiate the burn. This is kind of, like future sight. If I were to do X, Y, or Z at certain times, where that trajectory would bring me. So you'll see I'm just trying to line up a good intersection with the moon. Before I do that burn, though, we want to make sure that we're in the same plane as the moon. And the moon's probably the easiest thing to really hit, because the moon is relatively close to the same sort of orbit as the Earth. It's locked by its gravity, so they're kind of on the same plane. So we don't have to do too much of an adjustment. You can see it's already pretty close. What I am going to do is, it looks like we need to descend maybe a couple. Let's see. Yeah, so I'm going to take us around to one of these nodes where it's the most efficient to do this minor burn. This correction burn is just, again, going to flatten our orbit out to relative with the moon, instead of relative with Kerbin, because we want to intersect the moon as equatorial as possible. I mean, sometimes you do want to do different kind of insertions where I might want to do a polar orbit. We're going to do the same kind of orbit we're doing now, just around the moon once we get there. So I'm going to make those corrections now. What I'm doing is time traveling us over to that descending node, and that's the best place to do this little burn that's going to tilt our orbit. So right around the time I get there, you will see a small adjustment. It's probably about a 2-second burn, very small one, again, just to correct our orbit. So here we come around here to the node, and we are going to just make sure we keep an eye on that node as we burn down to 0. So in relation to the moon, we are exactly on the same plane. Our orbit is going to be exactly on the same plane. And you'll see that when we approach the moon, that we should be right around the equator. So now lining up that node that I was telling you about here, where we are going to insert ourselves into moon's gravity enough to circularize next around the moon. That would be the next thing we do. So it's the long burn to pushing our orbit out towards the moon, and then once we are in the sphere of influence of the moon, we're going to circularize around the moon, preparing for it landing. So I'm just going to try to get ourselves, to really make this burn efficient, we want to try to get ourselves as close to the moon without having to make corrections along the way. I've gotten pretty good at this, so I'll probably get it somewhere between 10 and 20,000 kilometers of the moon. It's usually around 5,000 kilometers. You really notice the gravity of the moon, and you'll see that when we start to land, with the velocities and the entrance to the moon, you'll see that speed accelerate, but only under probably about 5,000 or 6,000 kilometers. So I'm gonna, with this purple line here that's showing me our intersection, eventually, yep, there it is, it's gonna pop out and show us that we actually are above the moon at that periapsis, and I have that periapsis around 10,000 kilometers. So if I were to do this, hypothetically, if I were to do this burn perfectly, I will land somewhere around 10,000 kilometers above the moon. So where that node is, I have to do half of the burn before the node and half of the burn after the node. So you do a little bit of math here, but it tells me how long the burn is, so it's easy math. You do 50% of that before, 50% after. So before that node, which I'm approaching now, just a little time travel, we want to make sure that we are going prograde. So I want to flip the ship prograde here. Again, we're pushing that orbit out, so we need to fly prograde. So we're just rotating around before we do that burn until we hit prograde. And we're in prograde. So now we just got to get closer to that node to where I start the long burn, which again is 50% before, 50% after that node. We're almost there. Okay, so here's our long burn. So you're going to see our orbit start to climb. And we can see some views here. I am running a graphic mod on this game. The graphics to this game aren't as good as you're seeing right now, but thanks to the great community this game has, they're so kind to share all this stuff with you. There's all kinds of mods out there. I don't do too many of the mods, but I do for graphics. Definitely much nicer. So you'll see this is, if I do this burn correctly, this is basically what it would look like as our approach to the moon, again within 10,000 kilometers of the surface, which is exactly where we want to be. So that long burn is still proceeding ahead and is almost done. Just going to slow it down a bit so we can get this on. I really want to land right on that line because we know that line is good to go. So I'm just going to make this as good as I can. Sometimes it's hard, you pass it and you gotta flip the ship around and go the other way. But I did alright this time. Okay. Alright, so that's the end of our entry burn, or our insert burn. We are now fully on a trajectory or on a path to intersect the moon. So the next thing to do is to sort of just time travel our way up there, so we don't have to sit here and wait days. So we're going to time travel ourselves to when we're within the sphere of influence of the moon. So at the end of this blue line we leave the moon, or the sphere of influence of the Earth, and at that yellow line we will be within the sphere of influence of the moon. So just time traveling. I'm gonna open our satellite up just in case, now that we're getting further, just in case we lose our communication to the ground. If I lose that communication to the ground, I won't be able to do these nodes, which are, as you can see, extremely helpful. So just putting us in the moon's sphere of influence, which we are now. The next thing to do is to circularize ourselves around the moon in preparation for that landing burn. So we're going to basically do the opposite as we did when we left Kerbin. When we left Kerbin, we went and flipped the ship prograde, pushed our orbit out. In this sense, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to our periapsis and I'm going to flip retrograde, and I am going to burn so our orbit shrinks. Our orbit comes down and circularizes the moon. So we're rotating prograde or retrograde here, and this is going to kill velocity, so that's what brings that orbit down. I'm just going to close our solar panels and stuff because this is around the time when things can start to go wrong. You'll see periodically I quick save because things do go wrong, especially when you have mods included. So I'm just closing, again, manually all of these solar arrays, and eventually I'll close that satellite dish. I think we'll be fine without that radar, that satellite. I don't think the moon is too far for us, but so now I'm going to bring us over to our periapsis, where we're going to do that retrograde burn to close this orbit and circularize the moon. So we are burning, and you'll see this orbit is going to start closing. Eventually we'll turn into an orbit, or orbiting, and I want to get it to a circle. I want to get it close to the surface. Just watching, make sure we don't go too close. Okay. So we're now orbiting the moon. We are in a circle around the moon. If I did nothing right now, I would continue to go round and round and round. You'll see I actually have a satellite already in a polar orbit of the moon. That's doing some survey scanning for me for some science research. And I'm going to pick my spot basically where we're going to land at this point. So at any point on that circular orbit, in theory what you would do is another retrograde burn to continue to close that orbit until it is just below where you want to land. So I'm picking this crater over here. The craters are usually a good spot to land. Usually get some flat terrain to get forelegs on. Landing can be tricky in certain scenarios. So I'm going to wait until I'm just above that crater, which is where I want to land. And I'm going to wait for our ship to come around retrograde because we're going to start our next burn, which again is going to continue to close this orbit until we are simply not orbiting. Look at that. We're not even in orbit anymore. We are destined to impact the moon, but we have control over where. And I'm burning that until that stage is empty. That is the rest of our core stage. We now have what will be most of our returning vessel. There is a tank that I have right now that's going to be responsible for the rest of this burn, as well as our escape burn from the moon. And we're going to dump that last sort of flat tank there that you see on my lander. We're going to dump that last tank just above Kerbin when we re-enter. We're going to use every bit of that fuel. And again, we are a little overfueled for this, which isn't too bad, but still burning retrograde, just closing that orbit more and more and more until we are basically on a path to come straight down. So now we're left with nothing but a trajectory straight down to the moon. Perfect. Okay. And here's one of those funky things that might happen when you have mods on. My ship is not rendering. Cool. Try that one more time. Usually I can fix it. Alright. There's our ship. Alright, so let's deploy these landing legs. I probably should also close up that satellite. Alright, so we now are in our landing phase. So as you can see, our altitude is descending, our speed is increasing, and at some point we are going to have to burn and kill all of that velocity. But I don't want to do it too early because that's just inefficient. You get better at this too, and there is some math you can do here to really nail this and do what they do. They call a suicide burn, which is like you'll see SpaceX do, where they light that engine, I mean, hundreds of feet above the ground and kill that velocity to the exact moment. I mean, they have it down. They have been so impressive with their landings. And I'm landing on a surface that has hardly any gravity. They're doing this on Earth. So, very impressive. Just exposing some of our science. Going to see if there's any science we're doing here. You know, once you do science in a particular place, you don't get... No, we've done science here before, so I'm not going to get really too much science from any experiments floating above the moon. But when we land in this crater, I don't think I've been in this crater before, we should be able to get some good science. So I'm just wiping off some of that velocity right now. You don't want to be too fast. This is very much a feel thing for me. I know there's sites and programs and people out there that can probably tell you the math and how to really get yourself optimal here, but I think I've gotten pretty good at landing with my experience in Kerbal. So we're just going to continue the descent here. You know, watching our speed, watching our altitude. I usually like to land somewhere under 7 meters a second. You don't want to really be above that. It's going to damage something. 7 seems to be the sweet spot. Anything under that. So see, as I get close, usually within like, I'd say about 200 meters or so, I like to really bring the speed down. Make sure we don't make any mistakes here. And we want that soft landing. And I'm using the shift key and the control key to increase or decrease my throttle. You'll see here I accidentally hit shift 5 times in a row, so my sticky key went off, forgot to enable that, whoops. But we landed. There we are. Welcome to the moon. Welcome to the moon. So with my science experiments, we're just going to go around here, and yeah, we have good science here. You can see I'm going to get quite a bit of science points for landing in this crater, running experiments. I'm running things like atmospheric pressure, temperature, seismic data. Don't forget we have that Science Junior just above our science bin here. I'm going to run that as well. We have some goo canisters inside the science bay. We're going to run it all, really. Collect all the science we can while we're here. I am going to also run a crew report, which are always good science points. In our Science Junior here, going to run that. Good science there. Now we could transmit the science back, but you do lose some of the science points, so it's better to return with the science if you can. And we've designed this to return with the science to maximize those points that we're getting. So just making sure we've hit all of these and we don't forget to do any science. And I'll close that off. And let's do a little, what do you say we do a little EVA? Let's take our astronaut out and do even more science. So we're going to check a crew report from the outside. It's actually an EVA report. And we are going to climb off the vessel and onto the surface of the moon, where we can do a little bit more science as well as plant a flag. I mean, I think that's pretty cool. I get to plant a flag everywhere I land, and you can see them obviously on the maps and stuff and see what you really accomplished. However, I am stuck right now on a solar panel. You want to laugh? This is how I'm going to get off this solar panel. I'm going to have to deploy this solar panel because I seem to be stuck, and hopefully I'm not really stuck. Let's see if sometimes it's the mod glitching. Nope, I'm going to have to deploy my solar panel to get myself out of here. Yeah, there we go. Alright, that's one way to do it. Alright, don't climb on the solar panels. Lesson learned. Alright, so now we have our astronaut down on the surface. Very cool. Gonna do a little bit of science here. Yeah, this is like, that's glitched. I should be able to close that right now, and I can't. I'm having a little bit of, this is the risk you run when you run mods. You get some quirky things like this. No big deal. I mean, I wouldn't even mind if that broke off, if I couldn't retract it and had to fly with it out like that. Anyways. Okay, we have one solar panel. Anyways. So I'm going to take a few steps around here, put some footprints in the moon. We're going to do a little sample of the surface. And we are also going to plant our flag. I'm just going to title the name of this site. A little description. Alright. The flag has been planted. I think this is my 7th or 8th moon landing with this particular craft. In another video, I'll show you I have sort of a moon base going. I have a couple things that I've landed and attached to each other, and there are some astronauts actually staying over there doing science, and they've been for about 2 years now. In-game 2 years, in-game 2 years. And I transmit all that science back, and that gives me a passive sort of science income. You know, I'm passively making science credits while I have these people up on the moon station, as I call it. So with that said, let's climb back aboard and start our final phase of this mission, which is going to be our flyback to Kerbin. So typically when you leave a body and you're flying back to Kerbin, I typically like to fly east. And if I fly east along the moon's equator, that almost always gives me a very efficient trajectory to intersect. We are having a hard time right now getting onto this vessel and into it. Don't worry, we'll get there. But yeah, when I fly east off the moon, that puts us right on the path for a good insertion back to Earth, or Kerbin. So eventually we will find ourselves back aboard. Man, we are struggling here. You know, there's all these little aspects of my craft that jettison out. What I should have done is there's some ladder systems you can include. I did not put them on this. I threw this upper stage together rather quickly for the video. So we skipped the ladders, but I now see why I typically put them on. Alright, I think we did it. Let's close that. See if we can close this. Oh, we can. Alright, cool. Get rid of that solar panel finally. What I do want to make sure is that we did capture enough energy. I can't see it until I get back inside. So we'll get back aboard and check our power level. Those batteries on top there should be charged up. Yes, they are. Okay. Cool. We are ready to leave. We're ready to leave. I just want to check the map. And right, so we're gonna fly out east, circularize again, and then we'll be able to, this is my moon base over there, and then we'll be able to see that if we fly east off of here, we'll be able to stick ourselves right back towards Earth. And you'll see what that looks like in a little bit here. So with that said, we are going to quick save and then take off. Now obviously the takeoff, as I was saying before, is going to be a lot easier from the moon. There's hardly any gravity. So we don't need boosters, we don't need first asparagus stage as I had before to get us out of Earth. We don't need any of that. We simply got to climb high enough to clear any terrain and mountains. So like I said, I like to be over 5,000. I know there's some mountains on the moon that are around 8. I don't think we're near any of that. But I'll check too to make sure that we're going to clear everything. And once we're high enough to clear everything and we're out of that little bit of gravity, we can circularize pretty low here. We don't need to circularize up at 70, 80,000 like we did around Earth. I like to circularize somewhere around 10 here, which saves quite a bit of fuel, as you can imagine. So I'm going to wait until I'm high enough to make sure we clear everything, and you'll see our orbits kind of climbing there. And then once we are high enough, I go parallel to the planet, which I am right now, and I continue to burn, and that's gonna, just like we did previous 2 times, you burn in the prograde direction, you're parallel to that body that you're orbiting, increasing the velocity that increases your orbit. So with the maneuver node again, I'm able to see if I were to burn for a certain amount of time at a certain place where that's going to put me. And these are very helpful when planning, sort of your next burn. It takes the guesswork out, which you don't want to be guessing. You will be wrong most of the time. So I'm just trying to make sure that we are entering Earth's atmosphere. We want to come in around 35,000 kilometers or so. We want to be able to sort of kill a lot of that velocity with the re-entry, but if we enter too low, we're going to get too hot. We're going to burn up. This is also something that takes some practice and some learning as to where that speed relative to the temperature, relative to the atmosphere, altitude. There's a lot of variables there, but in this case, 35,000 is going to be the sweet spot. So now that we're high enough, we're going to pull those legs in, and we have our maneuver nodes set to do a prograde burn. Again, half before the node, half after the burn, or after the node. That burn would be optimal. So doing some quick maths here, you'll see when we need to start the burn all the way to when we are ready to stop the burn. So I'm just going to time travel up a little bit, and we're off. So we're now doing that prograde burn. You'll see we have plenty of fuel still to get ourselves back. So our orbit's going to push itself out and continue to do so until we leave the sphere of influence of the moon, which is coming up any second now. We are out of the sphere of influence of the moon and into the sphere of influence of Kerbin, or Earth. And we're going to line ourselves right up on that node that we planned. I went past it a little bit. So I was referring to this when we insert it to the moon. Sometimes you go past and you got to flip around. I'm burning retrograde to push that orbit back up a little bit. I didn't like how low it was coming in. And bring it back down. Okay. So that's where we want to be. We're going to re-enter at about 35,000 kilometers. So now, I have a remainder of fuel. What I like to do when I have extra fuel, which I knew we were going to be overfueled for this, and it's not a bad thing. It's only a good thing. Just, we wasted a little bit of money. So be it, ain't my money. So, what I'm going to want to do is, just like we did on the insertion of the moon, is I'm going to burn retrograde. I'm going to burn retrograde to kill some of that velocity with the remainder of fuel that I have. So we're going to slow ourselves down as much as we can with the remaining fuel that we have aboard before actually ditching this. Alright. So I'm just going to fast forward, time travel a little bit until we actually enter the atmosphere, which again is around 70,000 kilometers, and start that retrograde burn, burning off the rest of the fuel, slowing us down as much as we can before we ditch this tank. We might as well use the fuel because we are going to lose it. So you'll see I'm burning now. You'll see our velocity is slowing down pretty fast because we are now burning the opposite direction that we're traveling. And you'll see those temperatures that are indicating some heat there are actually on our landing legs, and that's fine. I don't think this is even going to climb up high enough to break them, and even if it were, so be it. I'm not worried about the landing legs. They are getting hot. I'd rather take the slowing down of the vehicle over needing landing legs that I'm about to ditch off of this in a few seconds. So I'm going to burn the rest of this fuel off, still killing our velocity pretty good. And the slower we are able to re-enter, the better, because we don't have to worry about temperature of other components that might actually blow up. We've done a good job of coming in pretty slow, and some of that's to do with this extra fuel we had. So once that tank is empty, what I like to do is sort of yaw the ship back, so when we stage this vessel, it doesn't collide or stick to us. So there we go, we ditched that. So now what we're left with is the heat shield is now doing its job. We have no more engines, no more fuel. We are simply free falling at the speed we're at. We're going to have to rely on parachutes to really slow us down the rest of the way. But I can tell you that once we are no longer a fireball here, those parachutes are going to do its job. You can see here the heat shield's deflecting all that heat away from important things. Those are definitely required for re-entry. right about here is when we will stop creating plasma and burning the heat shield, and we've slowed down to a safe speed now where I can deploy our drogue chute. These drogue chutes are usually deployed, these are used actually quite a bit in the space community. These are used to slow you down, sort of as a primary chute, to slowing you down higher in the atmosphere or at faster speeds. I have another chute, a radial chute, that's better for the lower altitudes and giving you that soft landing, but these drogue chutes are really effective at killing off a lot of that higher velocity when under that dangerous limit of temperatures. So we're within that now, where these drogue chutes will pop open soon. They're deployed, but they're not popped open yet. You'll see those drogue chutes pop open first. I did just deploy the radial chutes, so both are deployed, neither are opened yet. Those drogues, those red chutes there, are going to be the first to fully deploy and pop open, and you'll see our velocity come down quite a bit once that happens. Once those do their job, I will cut those off and rely just on the radial chutes. In this game you don't have to, but technically you would have your drogue chutes go, cut them, then your other chutes. You wouldn't have like we have right now, where I have 4 parachutes and 2 of them are glitching through the others. Yeah, video games. So now I'm working under the power of 4 chutes. I'm going to cut these drogues out. There goes one. And there goes the other one. And here we can see kind of what these graphical mods really do for this game. I mean, the water looks great. You just don't get this level of detail and stuff with the actual game. Hopefully in Kerbal, what we've seen of Kerbal 2 looks amazing. I mean, I cannot wait for that, but sounds like it's gotten delayed to 2022. So here we are, just almost touched back down here on our home planet, and we have successfully pulled off a lunar landing, as well as a return of some science and research and all that fun stuff. I really appreciate you guys for watching. I've been talking with friends about doing something like this for a long time, so I'm hoping that this is the first of many videos. I have a lot of other missions that I'm able to do or show you. It's hard. I don't want to get too technical because I feel like people will lose interest, but there's a lot of technical things happening that in the more advanced missions are going to need to be explained. So we'll see kind of what comes of this video, but yeah, that was our first mission. So we flew to the moon and back, and you'll see here in the next window we're going to see sort of our rewards of that. You know, the more stuff we bring back, more parts of the vessel we bring back, the more money we're making. The more science we've brought back, the more science we're making, and we did pretty well here. We made quite a bit of science, quite a bit of cash. That's the goal, you know. Now we take this and we go make better things, and my pilot upgraded. So there you go. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Please like, comment, subscribe, whatever you gotta do to know about my next video, because I'm sure more are coming. Thanks, guys.